Hi, and welcome to Complete and Cast, the official podcast for Complete and Box video games. I'm your host, Spencer, and today, in episode 27, we got some video game reviews for you. And we are once again joined by...
Parker! The official. Well, no, this is the unofficial Parker. I don't like official Parker.
I gotta say, I like you a lot more unofficial Parker. Official Parker's kinda annoying.
Oh my god, he goes on and on and on.
Don't tell him.
Yeah, he just goes on and on.
But yeah.
I like me too.
He's kind of a odd grader too. He always grades stuff on these higher than me. I think everyone so far, except for possibly 6, which we both had low, but you had like absurdly low.
Yeah, I was like angry.
You always have it like you end up being like half a point higher than me. Ever the cynic. Anyway, so today we are going to be continuing our string of reviews. We are going to be talking... we had a nice break there where we talked about Life is Strange and Doom. Yep. Mm-hmm. Now we're back on the Resident Evil bandwagon.
There we go.
And unfortunately, at this point, we are out of co-op Resident Evil games. Right. We've played them all. Now there's a couple more that I'm going to suggest we play and go from there, but in terms of co-op game. So we're talking Resident Evil Revelations 2. Now... I can't see this. This is one of those games that's like 6. Like I literally couldn't even say the words Resident Evil 6 without starting into this whole thing. Like it was like Resident Evil 6. So it's like
so.
And it was like 7. It's like so.
So keep in mind that the title is Revelations. So like in my mind, if I'm gonna, it's gonna be. Oh, cool! It's going to be revealing something about the Resident Evil story.
So, if we're going to give a quick
rundown
of Revelations 2, it's not as bad as 6, but what is?
Right.
But it's not as good as 7 and probably 5. 5 is probably a better game, or they're on the same level kind of thing. Now,
I mean, it's better than 4.
As far, get out of here. You still haven't played that yet, right? Maybe that will be the one we do next. Anyway, so
or last.
So in turn, I'll make you do literally Resident Evil like 3, like the most annoying one.
Oh, I played part of 3. It's so hard.
But I'm gonna make you do like I won't even have to play it. Like I can just sit down and be like, oh yeah, well this happened. You'll be like, yeah. All right, so we set this up into 6 different categories. We have story, gameplay, sound, which includes all voice acting, music, sound effects. We have graphics and atmosphere. That's one category. Fun factor and replayability. We grade these all out of from 0 to 10. I would give a 0. Oh yeah. I haven't yet, but I would.
I was thinking about it with RE6.
With RE6. One of these days we're going to play something that's truly terrible. And it'll be the longest episode ever because we'll just keep talking about it. When we talk about our grading, unlike a lot of the video game reviews you see out there where something like an 8 or a 9 or a 7 is like decent, we view a 5 as decent. So if we would give something like a story a 5, it's merely average. That does not mean it's bad. This isn't high school where that's failing you. Right. This is 5 is, we've given a lot of good games. I just gave Doom a 7.9 overall. That's a good game. Oh, yeah. That's a good game. So keep that in mind when we're giving these. If you're like a 6, I mean, I don't think there's a lot of people out there that are going to be like championing Resident Evil, like Revelations 2. I can say that for Doom if I'm like, replayability is 6. What? Come on, man.
Right,
but like, no one's going to be like, excuse me, Revelations 2. So let's start up before we go into story by saying that it's such a shame that Revelations 1 isn't, to my knowledge, I don't believe it is, a co-op game. Yeah. Because Revelations is fantastic. It is such a good merger of the old schoolness of like 1 through 3. Like it even almost has those kind of controls going on, and then the newer action of like the 4s and 5s. It is just awesome. It's like it tones down the action on 5, and it spruces up the horror and everything. It's a fantastic game, and we might honestly have to go through it because it's been years. It's hard to believe that was first a 3DS game, Revelations 1, and then eventually they brought it out to PS3 and 360. I digress. So Revelations 2, it reveals nothing.
There are no revelations.
Let's start with the story. Now, we have to take Resident Evil stories with a grain of salt. Because they are, at this point, even past anything, including in past 4, are like so unbelievably complicated, where you would need like a literal chart. This famous episode of Always Sunny in Philadelphia where Charlie is figuring out something, I forget what it is, and he has this huge...
Yeah, when they work for the company. And
he works for the company, and he has this huge... billboard set up with like a million different papers on it,
and all these, connecting with yarn,
and they're literally connecting with yarn, like you might see in like a serial killer movie where it's like that's where the bodies are, and like I feel like that's what you have to do with like Resident Evil storyline because it is so complicated. Like every game introduces like this new virus, this new company that is Umbrella but isn't Umbrella, and this new company that's going to try to take down Umbrella. And this isn't even considering the movies, which are not canon. Get out of here. They're not canon. So it's just so complicated. Mm-hmm. Now, if we are looking at Revelations 2 on its own, which is what we do, this one isn't so complicated. This one is relatively simple. And if we're talking, again, just for what it is, it is definitely...
I would say until the very end, when they connect it, when they really connect it back into what's going on.
Yes.
Then it gets like,
but in general, it's kind of like a thing on its own, and it's kind of a side story. Although it is, from what I can tell, still canon. Like I don't think you have to be in the numbered series 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to.
You're not gonna spoil anything.
Yeah. So it is this separate thing. Now, Revelations 2 takes place, we found out through the game, sometime after 5, because they mentioned the Africa incident. Yep. That's just how you mention...
They mention Africa and the 4.
Yes.
Whatever that town
Europe.
is.
That's how you mention a billion people dying, is just say that incident. So it takes place, and we believe we found a something in the game that signifies that this takes place a little bit before 6.
Yeah, like less than a year or something. Like not a huge amount of time.
And 6, again, we're not going to go into it, is the most convoluted story of all time, where essentially the entire world is like overrun.
Right.
Essentially. So this game takes place on a Russian or close to Russian island. The reason we know that is we meet a character that is like heavily Russian.
Yeah.
Takes place some place over there because the weather is not good, and just
I mean, I guess that guy could have like worked there and then I don't know, but but it's somewhere. It's definitely, you're definitely not supposed to know. I mean, it's not supposed to be obvious that it's like in the Pacific or in the Atlantic or like up north or down south. Like, you're kind of like supposed to be at a loss. It definitely doesn't seem tropical though.
Yes.
But like it's not obvious where you are.
It's an island, and the entire game takes place on this island. So
you're dead the whole time.
Oh my gosh, I love how Lost ended that way. It didn't. Okay, so there's 2 main stories going on.
Right.
You have Claire and Moira. Which is the
Claire
worst.
Redfield.
Redfield.
An actual RE character.
And Moira Burton, who you find out, this isn't a secret, who you find out is Barry Burton's daughter.
Right.
That brings us to the other part of the story, which is Barry Burton and this little girl you meet named
Natalia.
Natalia.
He calls her Natalie, I think, but like Natalia is her name or whatever.
My bad on that one. So... it's set into 4 different episodes because originally this game was set up at one of those Walking Dead style things. I would be so oh my god, where you like download an episode or maybe you buy the season pass or whatever, and eventually
3 months later another one.
And eventually they came out with the disc, which is obviously how we played it. And by the way, we played it on the PS4. This is one of those games where it was also released on the PS3.
Right.
So we're playing on the superior version here. So there's 4 different episodes. You always start out with Claire and Moira. And then eventually you find Barry. Right. Now, the big reveal that happens early on in the game, you find out that... Well, so like you're going through with Claire and Moira, and you're going towards... Let's start with this. Essentially, the major thing is you're on this island. You were... Captured.
Right. There's a group called TerraSave,
which essentially is anti-Umbrella. Let's make this as simple as possible. They
show a PSA of TerraSave showing up in Africa to like clean up the mess of Umbrella.
I don't even
save
like.
everybody.
How do you clean up a mess of like a bunch of zombies and stuff? Like a virus? Like, here's your cure. Oh, you're still dead.
Right. So they're having like a dinner party or something, and Umbrella presumably shows up, all guns blazing, capturing and killing people.
Steals you. And you find out that Moira and Claire are there. Claire is presumably, because she knows everyone there, working for TerraSave.
Yeah.
And Moira is, I think...
I don't know why they captured them. That was never very clear. Like, it wasn't clear that they were going to do something specifically with them.
So, just like every single Resident Evil game, there's this overarching thing where there's this person who comes up with a virus and finds out that it has, like, unwieldy power, which it does, and eventually gets to the point where they, like, inject themselves and become crazy or whatever. So... And at the same time, they're making all these different creatures.
Right.
So you're on this island, and you have this bracelet, right? And the bracelet...
and somebody keeps talking to you, this woman.
The overseer talks to you, and it's almost like a Saw type game, where it's like, go through here, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, it unlocks doors for you, this little bracelet. And it also, you find out, it does something where when your fear level... Although this isn't like a mechanic in the game, if your fear level reaches a certain point... It like injects you with something and you transform into something crazy because one of the guys you meet, that happens to them. They get scared, they freak out, and they become like a super crazy beast man. Like every other Resident Evil game, the thing like takes Ouroboros, that thing takes over or whatever.
So, I mean, the bracelet thing is confusing because there obviously these people who turn into these monsters, which there's more than a couple. Are injected. The question is, are they injected when they have fear? The other thing that's also kind of confusing is Moira at some point her bracelet does turn red and nothing happens to her, and we'll go into that later. So I don't quite understand.
Maybe she can inject you remotely because because the overseer, at least for the most part at the beginning, sounded like she was constantly watching them. So maybe she was like, oh, he's scared enough that if I inject him, it'll cause the reaction.
Yeah.
Because maybe if you just inject people, they don't transform the same way. I don't know. It's very not clear.
Clearly, I mean, that's how it's always worked in the Resident Evils. Yeah. Like, Tyrant in Resident Evil 1 was a dude, but just got, like, way more of the T-virus. And that's, like, understandable.
Right.
Like, you're not drawing to... I mean, again, we're talking a zombie game, so it's not, like, my realm of possibilities.
Yeah, there's not...
But it's okay, all right, so, you get more of it, or you get a higher dose, and you become bigger. I mean, the final boss in Resident Evil 2, like, usually the people who become zombies in that city... like the bubonic plague, rats get the G virus and then like bite someone, and that someone bites someone else, and yada yada. The final boss in Resident Evil 2 like literally injects himself with a huge thing and becomes like super strong. So it's understandable there.
Yeah.
Now you're following this overseer who eventually, I don't even know. So the
overseer.
This gets confusing.
I mean, what are you gonna just reveal? I mean, the overseer's Alex.
Yeah. Okay. So spoilers. Blah blah blah. The overseer ends up being Alex Wesker, who is...
Did you ever meet her before?
No.
Okay, so this is the first time, but she's a Wesker.
She's a Wesker.
And she's definitely a Wesker.
Sister to Albert Wesker.
Right. And she's definitely like a Wesker, where she like maybe has powers or whatever and is crazy.
She learned from Albert, because she mentions him a couple times, who... Albert Wesker for the Resident Evil series, at this point, has become the heiress of Final Fantasy VII, where it's like... He's long gone, I'm presuming, but like no character can do freaking anything without talking about Wesker. Like he's like God incarnate.
Yeah.
Like good guy or bad guy, it's always like Wesker. Like, and it's just like it seems like every person is his child.
Yeah.
At this point, like every person is like, I'm Jake Wesker.
Right.
I'm his son. And
they always have to somehow connect it back to Wesker. Like that's become the thing in Resident Evil. There's no just other thing. There's no just like you can't. It's not just enough that it's Umbrella and the T or whatever letter virus.
Even if it's a new character, somehow they'll be like, I learned this from Wesker.
Exactly.
It always ends up being Wesker, which is so. 5 is fine because like whatever. But
I mean,
like,
you're still fighting Wesker, so it makes sense.
But like after that, it's like. I can't believe I mentioned the Saw movies twice here, but it's like, it ends up being like the Saw movies where it's like, literally every person after Jigsaw dies in 3, spoilers, like, it's just like, I am Jigsaw, and it's just like, dude, come up with your own thing. So, now we're at the point where it gets kind of confusing, because...
Like, my initial thing was, why did they capture them? Like, was Alex mad at Claire?
I think...
Because she's related to Chris?
I think she just wants, like... I think she just wants it to be like a game, and like
Okay.
clearly, so you find
She
out
just
through,
wants to mess
you
with
find out
people.
through all these different like documents that you find that like she's just like she takes a bunch of people, she brings them to the island, and she experiments on them. Classic Resident Evil.
Yeah.
And I guess she
just chose
bored of
Claire
that
because
and just wants to see
it's a
how
Redfield.
maybe see how it is, and
Right.
it's like Claire's strong. Let's see if she can fight through these things.
So she's aware of Claire because, like, Wesker was aware of Claire,
and
right?
this is one. Yes,
They met, or were they like? I don't know how that works.
Yes,
Claire's
they
from
met
2?
in Code Veronica. They met in Code Veronica, so they did.
All right.
And obviously, he knows Claire from Chris, and
Right.
met
Well,
Chris
yeah,
every
Wesker
time.
and Chris have a storied
So
past.
this is one of those classic ones where classic bad things where like she could have killed Claire at literally any moment,
absolutely,
or could have not put her through this, and
Yeah.
like it does fall apart because you're like not quite understanding why it's happening.
Right.
Like,
I guess
I will say that overall, I don't know about you, but I had a fun time with the game.
Yeah,
like, I thought it was a pretty fun game. But
story-wise,
if we're
I was
talking just
confused.
story, like it's like very for a story that happens on its own and isn't like Resident Evil 6 was confusing because like it was a grand scheme that the president wasn't involved in, and you're in all
Like,
these different places. But for a place where you're on just like one island,
in the beginning of this section, you even said it's simple, and it is on the surface fairly simple. You've been captured. You're trying to figure out the island, and something happened.
but you don't
like,
know why.
Right, and then the way they connected to Barry 6 months later is that
yes, and that's a big thing, and that's
Right.
I was kind of leading into it, but I didn't know when to get to it.
Right.
Because every time you play as Barry, it's 6 months later. So episode 1, you do whatever, you get to this tower and you send out a distress call. 6 months later, Barry finally gets it and finds his way to this place.
Well, no, because remember we found out that Barry saw Claire. That's how
right.
he finds out
That's
that
right.
the island even exists. And then when he gets near it, then he hears the distress call.
That's
so
right.
he's been
Okay.
searching.
So originally we thought that it's because of the distress call.
Right.
But then it ends up that Claire, when she leaves the island, is being rushed into intensive care.
Right.
And she says
So you don't find it out
something
till
about,
later,
She
'cause
said
they're-
he's like, "How's Moira?" and which is his daughter, by the way. We've been through that, and she's like, "Oh no," and then he's like, "I gotta find Moira," and then he figures it out, kind of thing.
Because they happen concurrently, so you don't find out the very end of Claire's story until like near the very end of Barry's story. So like for the most of the time, you're not quite sure if Moira is dead or alive. And at the very end of Claire's part, you're pretty sure that she's
So at the end of part 1 of Barry, Natalia, who is this little girl who has, I guess that's gameplay. So this little girl who's just
somehow
there,
connected,
whatever, somehow
to something.
connected.
You're just
is
like,
he's
whatever.
like he finds this distress call and he's like Moira, and she's like she has this feeling, like this crazy premonition, and is like Moira's dead,
Right.
And then you go on from there, figuring like, okay, it's 6 months later, what happened,
Right.
And then you're kind of like unraveling it through again. You go
Back to Claire.
You go back 6 months,
Right.
You do the Claire part, and then you go forward.
And
6
then
months.
in that part, then you find out that Claire and Moira met up with this Natalia, little girl.
Yes.
So then that connects them. So you're like, oh, this little girl was here for both parts. So you're like, okay. So she might even know that Moira died because she saw her die.
So Alex, the overseer, Alex Wesker, you find out at some point later in Claire's quest that she kills herself. She, for some reason that I don't quite understand, because she was... I'm serious. Because
No,
she-
yeah, you don't...
You find her in this, like, almost like...
She's talking to
almost
you.
like Doom type sequence where you see something happening, but you can't do anything about it. She's behind
Would
glass.
you kindly?
Seriously, she's behind... So she's behind glass. You can't get... You're there, but you're not, like, holding a gun to her.
Nope.
And she just puts a gun up to her head and kills herself.
Right.
And you're like, okay. And then you start to, try to find your way off the island.
Right.
So you do all... Essentially, to make it super easy for Claire's, it's... You want to find out what the overseer's doing. You find out it's Alex Wesker. She kills herself for literally no reason that I can tell. Like, it's not like she's like... It's not like when she's talking about she's going into nonsense, but she's not like, killing myself will make me ultra powerful.
Right,
it's just like, she just does it.
I'm sure if we look this up, there'll be an explanation, but the fact that we don't know it is a problem. It was not obvious
It
at
was not.
all.
It might be in-game, but it wasn't obvious. So then the second part of Claire's quest, you just try to get off the island.
Right.
Now, it is kind of interesting in the way it's set up that you will... you see what Alex Wesker had injected herself, so she became this like hideous like mess of whatever. She was just like all messed up kind of thing. She was still alive because she had the virus in her, and that's understandable. So at a certain point, you are dealing with the messed up Alex Wesker, who's all crazy and stuff, with Barry, while at the same time Alex Wesker is alive in Claire's one, and you don't quite put it together until you see it, because she's not like, I'm Alex Wesker. You just see this crazy thing, and you're like, what? And then you find Alex Wesker, and she kills herself, and then you're like, oh, somehow she becomes that. And then you're like, oh, okay, she got the virus or whatever. So I guess that's the majority of that. You get to the end, and the end of Claire's quest, Claire survives, and don't give the other part away quite yet. So you see Moira... like 10,000 pounds of concrete falls on her,
dude. The angle they show it at
is like
smashes her head.
Huge concrete falling on her head. You see her
like
arm,
pieces of building.
You see her arm come out and then go down. So you're like, damn, she's dead.
Right.
And they try to make it super epic at the end, where like.
You have to choose.
The person playing is Claire, you know. You have to choose, but you can't.
There's no choice.
There's no choice.
If you stood there, you would die too. Like
you just jump off, because in classic Resident Evil, the whole place is turning around. It's not like you can just be like, I'll go back, because the whole place is exploding. But then you choose to save yourself. So that's the conclusion of the stuff 6 months in the past. Now we've been going through the Barry stuff. The conclusion of that is you find out that this is where I'm going to get confused. We just played.
Well, and because of Claire jumping off, you find out then at that point that she gets rescued after she jumps off the island. Like, I don't know if she has a way to, but somehow she is able to contact somebody. She gets picked up by a ship, whatever. She makes her way back to the real world, and then Barry, like, obviously, because they're friends,
is there.
Runs and he knows that Moira was last seen with her, is like, what's going on? Are you okay? Where's Moira? And she's like, oh my god, Barry, I'm so sorry, because the last she saw
she can barely say anything, so she's like, she's Moira, you know.
So Barry's like, kind of not sure, like, I mean, like, Claire does say in that sequence, I'm so sorry, Barry. So, like, presumably he would assume she's dead, but maybe also she means she left her behind. She doesn't know. Like, so he just goes to
I gotta say,
search.
As far as that cutscene is concerned, I understood what was happening, but I did not understand when it was happening. When it was happening. So I was like, did this happen, like, before the Moira thing? And then eventually you're like, oh, okay. But, like, the way it's placed in the game, it was not completely obvious like, when it happened. So you're like, is this, like, way in the future?
Right.
But it wasn't. It was before the Barry stuff.
Right. And the other thing was at the beginning of Barry's segment, when you hear the distress call, the very end of the Claire segment was Moira sending the distress call, and it wasn't clear that it was like a repeating message. So at first, I thought, oh, these are happening concurrently exactly. Like, Barry's showing up to the island and hearing Moira talk into the thing. But then it was clear that 6 months had passed.
That was
very early on. You see everything falling apart, and you're like, wait a minute, this is not just happening.
It wasn't necessarily a big reveal, but it wasn't like when you were starting the Barry quest that it was like 6 months later. So you have to piece it together.
Yeah.
So here's where it kind of all unravels at the end. We'll get into the Moira stuff in a second. So you find out that Natalia was created.
She's a clone.
A clone of Alex.
Yeah.
Who shares the Wesker stuff. So again, this is another one of those, like, literally the Wesker thing. Unless Resident Evil 7 was a complete revamp of it, at this point the Wesker stuff can't die. Yeah. You know, it just is what it is. So you find that out. Now, again, Alex had killed herself for some reason that we're not sure. That was not made completely obvious. So she was all hideous, and she resents Natalia for being like a clone that's still
alive.
Now, and okay.
I'm under the impression, and this might be something if we looked it up, and it would make a little bit more sense, is that the thing you fight at the end that's Alex, right, is another, like, the Alex that we saw kill herself was original Alex, okay? And that there were two clones, and one got injected wrong, or the virus treated her wrong, and she became that monster, only because part of the monster's face is like little girl face. And it's not like she's wearing a mask. It looks like underdeveloped, like she's still a little girl.
So you're saying that it might be Alex, and they made 2 clones from her.
Or she made multiple clones or something, and then...
One was messed up.
She picked that one, injected it with the virus in order to make her super powerful like her brother Wesker, and it reacted violently, and she became that monster. But then the other one, like, wasn't reacting, and so that's why she resented her, because she was like, how are you still pure and perfect? Because you find that one thing where she was like kind of rattled, like one of the papers was her like rattling off like, I'm the perfect one, she's the disgusting one, and she's the vile one, and it's like, so she clearly is upset that Natalia looks like good.
Right.
Like normal.
So here's where the game falls apart story-wise.
Immediately.
You fight Alex or this
whatever,
clone of Alex.
Something.
And
this weird
you beat her. She picks up Natalia, and Natalia like suddenly has powers. You know, her eyes change just like...
She looks like she's gonna die, and then all of a sudden she
her eyes change just like Albert Wesker's did, and the clone of Alex or whatever like dies.
Yeah,
and
she
you're like,
basically rips her heart out, and suddenly has these crazy powers.
And you're
where
like,
she, like,
I guess you're like,
stuff.
we just did it earlier tonight, and we're like, cool. And then of course Natalia looks at you and is like, Barry, what do you mean, Natalia? You know, I forget exactly what she said. Essentially implying that she is like...
She's Alex all along.
She was Alex all along, so like...
I couldn't tell that part.
Maybe like, it was definitely not obvious. Maybe the fact that she like killed that Alex or Alex clone, that she like... Because you saw the heart she pulled out, like kind of like turn into dust.
Yeah.
So maybe the dust like was inhaled by her. They should have made it obvious. So it's
no, because she looked evil when she was killing the bad thing.
So
like
I'm
she
guessing,
had a look in her eye that was evil.
I don't think, or I don't want to think that the entire time the purpose of Natalia was
I don't
to
think that.
double cross. It was just like something.
I think it was unlocked in her.
Yes.
And she became the true Alex Wesker with powers and crazy.
So, the final part is Barry is sitting there and is like, don't make me do this, don't make me shoot you. And Natalia / Alex starts walking away very slowly, so he easily could have done it, and it just cuts to black. So you don't know if he did it or didn't do anything. That's the major story.
Right.
We've been over all the confusing parts.
So,
Here's the part...
you're pretty depressed because you're like, damn, Barry's like went to the island to look for his daughter, who, like, he had a rough relationship with. The daughter, I mean, not really bad. The daughter's a teenage girl. And she's, like, mad at her dad because every teenage girl is mad at her
Before we go into the
parents.
extra reveal, let's talk about the characters. They're not great.
No.
Barry is... I've always had a soft spot for Barry. Right. So Barry's that, like... ultimate dad.
Yeah.
That
and
like that
he's
if you're
fairly
like that if you're like and he's fairly likable. He's
probably the most likable character.
He's the kind of dad if you're like, Dad, can we do blah? He's always like, oh, absolutely, son, let's go, you know, kind of thing. And it's not going to be.
But also like pretty protective.
Yes.
Because he's Barry. He sees Resident Evil.
So it'd be like, I want to go. Yeah. And
he sees the events of Resident Evil. He's like probably the only real person.
Let's finish up on Barry first before we go into that part. So just in general, he is, you know, very protective, but it's understandable for that.
He lives in this universe. He's like, no, there's Raccoon City happening.
We have his daughter, Moira, who is terrible.
Oh my god.
Just so bad.
She's
like,
teenage girl to the extreme.
But like
remember how I was like giving Life is Strange some slack because they were teenage girls? And I was like, well, some of the things they do, they're teenage girls. This girl was like just so awful.
And like it would be different if her like dad was like bad, but she's like constantly harping on Barry like, oh, he just wants to protect me and keep me safe. And it's like,
oh, how dare you.
Oh, freaking heck.
As a soon to be father of a daughter, like it's like you're like just watching and like you couldn't roll your eyes anymore because it's like,
but not only is it like yes, you can be overprotective. Dad, can I go out with my friend? No, I'm worried, blah blah blah. You know, and that's like on the line. But this is like, okay.
You live in a world where
with like
zombie
zombies,
outbreaks.
And it's like he just wants me to be safe and stuff. It's like, how dare he? So that's her character the whole time. Eventually, near the very end, she's like, maybe I give him a bad rep, whatever. So she's terrible. Natalia has like no character. She's just a little girl with pigtails. Yeah. No character. There's nothing to talk about. Alex, we talked about in the last game how the female, I forget her name already, from Doom.
Olivia Pierce.
Olivia Pierce is like this crazy character,
Right.
but
she's
is
very
like,
simple
but
evil.
she's very simple evil, but it works. This is a very simple evil that doesn't work, where you're just like,
because they try to connect all this stuff.
The literal freaking only reason that you're interested in this character or that she's evil is that she's a Wesker. There's no other reason. She's just like, I'm a Wesker, my brother messed around with virus, so therefore I have to too.
And clearly the Wesker family is messed up, so like because it created Wesker, so obviously she grew up in the same environment, but it's still not enough to be like, okay, that makes sense. Like,
so she takes hundreds of people to an island and
just
tortures them and experiments on them. And
turns them into those like Voldo looking things from Soul Calibur, like weird like pieced together people.
And she's terrible.
Yeah,
like the parts where she talks to you on like the intercom on your
she's so like Ada level
like,
snark.
And it's just like, and it's just terrible.
Yeah, you're just like,
so. And Claire is just Claire is just blended into the wall. There is literally nothing spectacular about what she does.
The only thing that if she would have just blended into the wall, I probably would have liked her a little bit better. But they added that extra thing where those characters that you met up with, like Pedro and that other guy, like she like has a thing for one of them, and Moira keeps joking about it. And instead of Claire being like, dude, we're escaping an island. Like, I understand if Moira is awful, because she was already an awful teenager. Like, it's understandable if she says dumb stuff. Just let her character be terrible. But, like, they would have Claire be like, I don't know what you're talking about. And, like, kind of, like, playing into it, and you're like, what's happening?
Yeah.
Like, you're all dying of viruses.
And that
like,
was weird because the entire tone of the game wasn't that. If it was, like, RE6, for all of its faults, at least, like, the whole time didn't super take itself seriously, which was part of its problem. But so when Jake's, like, messing around is like, back for more, huh? For this huge, crazy guy, it's, like, understandable. But, like, this was, like, all depression the whole time. And then it's like,
then these
it's
snarky...
like, oh, you know, and then the guy that she, like, likes becomes, like, a freaking monster.
Oh,
and
you have to fight him. It's like, damn.
And in general, like, all the side characters are all terrible. So they're all terrible. I mean, it's
well, because that side character double crosses you, remember?
Yeah.
At the end, because he was like, Ouroboros' power, I'm powerful. And you're like, you had a thing for that guy. Like, they could have not left that in. You had a thing for that guy.
I'd be like, you did it. You got bad taste, girl. So, in general, so that's all the stuff. Now, let's get into the very last part of the story. Now, we're sitting at the end. Moira's dead.
Barry maybe is gonna die? He's at least, like, he's in a building that's burning, and Natalia's walking away.
Natalia is this
a
superhuman,
thing. Like, terrible person.
So we're like, well, there's these two extra side mission kind of things. So let's.
That was on the disc.
Now,
I don't know when they were released.
The second one is really throwaway. It's just your Natalia trying to find her pet or her stuffed bear, it's a sneaking thing and it's done.
Right,
Whatever.
yeah.
There's no story to that.
There's the only thing is like it's your like kind of Smeagol like Gollum subconscious of like the evil side and the good side, and like the evil side's trying to corrupt you.
And you find out it's Alex trying to corrupt you and trying to get you to like take the virus and whatever, and you won't because you're strong and whatever.
Yeah.
Which again makes the ending of the game be like, okay, like she was so, for a little girl, strong, you know, and then it's just like, okay, she overcame it. You know, she didn't overcome it, excuse me.
Yeah.
So then the other part, you find out that Moira lived through that. And that is such a huge thing. Like, I don't care about the character, and they probably
it's called
won't,
the struggle.
The struggle. They probably won't ever bring her back again, or even they'll probably retcon the whole game. But if you wouldn't have played this extra thing, you would have been like, oh, Moira was dead. I don't really care, but Moira's dead.
Right.
The first thing that happens in this is you find out like it's just like
there was this one bit NPC that you met like halfway through the Claire's mission. He was like this Russian guy, and he like helped you, like this old Russian guy, very clearly a survivalist, like just lived in a bunker, like just basically like I just go out, blah 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 blah, you know, very very stereotypical Russian dude. And that's it. He like just was there to open one door, and then you moved on, and you completely forget about him. And then you find out that he like found her in the rubble, and like brings her out, nurses her back.
It's so hard to believe because that's so much later in the game that you get to this huge like complex, which by the way was like by the time you escape, there's like a minute left, whatever. So this dude had to be like following you anyway. Whatever, throw that all out. it's dumb, but like then you find that like she's still on the island and this guy is there and he's tough and he's like he doesn't call her by he doesn't even ask her name and he's just like if you want to live here, you know, first of all he's like go and she's like I have nowhere to go and then he's like if you want to live here you will provide everything you're in and whatever you go through this stuff and you play. It's actually pretty fun gameplay wise that part, but
it's cool. It's a cool idea. Like in the beginning you have to try to gather resources and that's your replays and it's by like basically collecting rations, killing rabbits and whatever, and you collect rations, and then those are your replays for like the bulk of the game.
So the gameplay of it is separate. That's fun. So the story of this is so dumb because again, it's like when I'm like Dead Space 2 is the best example I can ever think of this. Where I was talking to my one friend who was like absolutely in love with Dead Space.
You had to read the novels,
and I'm like I didn't understand this, and he's like, oh, you had to read the novel, and it's like, no, and it's just like a side thing. Like Resident Evil 7 did a really good side thing where you see more of Marguerite, the mom, but it's not like, oh, well, if you didn't know this, then you didn't know Marguerite lived after you beat her. So it's like, that would be absurd. This one takes place earlier, and you're like, oh, she's crazier than I thought. She's super crazy. So in general, like, just what happens at the end of that quest? The Russian guy dies from some disease, whatever. He's coughing up blood, and then
and basically 6 months pass, and so Moira survives those 6 months, and then Barry shows up at the island. A bunch of stuff happens. I do not know how they were on the island at the same time and didn't see each other because Barry was all over the damn place.
And making noise everywhere he goes, like a bunch of bullets.
And so you're talking about there's a dude on the island who's like a survivalist who's not aware that another human like comes on the island, considering that he found her in the rubble. Whatever, suspend your disbelief. But the huge story point is that Moira's alive, and she shows up at the very end of the part. You see Barry laying there as Natalia's walking away, having just like turned into Superman and had got a billion superpowers, and like you see Barry, so you're like, oh, they reunite. So it's like that's major.
That's like, major. And one of the other things that's major from this side part is that Moira has to learn how to use guns. A big thing for her, and this will go into gameplay, is that Moira will not use guns because of an incident. Something happened where she will not use guns. So I'm sitting there thinking like, okay, at this point she's like a hardcore survivalist kind of thing, that she's gonna pull out a gun and shoot Natalia, and that would be actually really
would have been kind of cool,
pretty cool. But
especially if she picked up the survivalist had this rifle that was amazing.
Yeah,
it would be great if she picked up the rifle and shot her. That'd be great.
So it doesn't. It just cuts to she goes, Dad, and then it cuts to black. So
you're like, yay, they
this
reunited.
game is never gonna be like it's never gonna be sequeled on.
No.
Barry should, if Resident Evil isn't totally retcon, should appear again. But like again, it just makes it even more
even
like
if it's retcon,
was there the whole time.
Right. Yeah.
So let's go to scores real quick. I was gonna give it, because it had parts that were interesting to me until it broke up at the end, I was going to give it a 5.
Right.
Completely average, where it had good ideas, but it was like all jumbled and weird. But because of the part where you find out a big reveal in Moira at the end in something you don't have to play,
right,
I'm docking it a point.
But clearly, that I don't think they had written that story in. Like, I think when they created that separate part, they were like, oh, we could do another cool gameplay thing.
And to do that, they had to do this like story thing.
And because I mean, maybe they did, and they're just really bad at it. But like, the way they show her die was not like maybe she lived.
Yeah.
It was like very clear she died. Like when I'm talking about cement, I'm not talking about a cinder block. I'm talking about like the entire foundation falls on her, like a chunk of rebarred, reinforced steel cement falls on her,
like an 18-year-old girl,
right? And not like, oh, but the floor fell under her and blah blah blah. No, you see her hand underneath the rubble. She's straight up dead. So the fact that they just were like, oh, she wasn't, was like, okay, F you, game.
But I mean, also, if they were going to do that, they should have made it like something, like they could have done that part so much better and made it something like she could have survived, but Claire had to jump. But the way they did it was like, okay, she's dead, but then it's like, she's clearly dead, but then it was like, well, you have the option, but you don't. So, I don't know, they could have done something where, like, an enemy started dragging her, and it would have been, like, too big of a jump,
right.
you know, for Claire, and she's just like, I have to go, I have to survive, you know,
and
kind of thing.
And then maybe threw Moira her gun, and then it was up to Moira to decide what to do, or whatever. Anything. And then it's like, well, it's probably not likely that an 18-year-old girl who's never shot a gun is able to take down, like, a revenant, or whatever they were called. Like, you know, probably she's dead, but, like, you don't know. Like, that would have been great. Like, but no, they showed her get crushed under friggin' cement. And so dumb.
Because it wasn't extra, dumb. because that story part was separate, but not extra downloadable content, and had something big, I'm docking it. I'm giving the story... Fistful of Crap a 4.
I'm going to give this story, I want to give it like a 2.5, but I think I'll give it a 3 because there was some stuff that was sort of interesting, I guess.
I mean,
but it was just so jumbled.
I liked when you met up with all your like friends from Terra Save or whatever. Like that was cool.
Yeah.
And they messed it up by having all the characters being crappy, but that was kind of neat.
Yeah. There were some moments of like, okay, but like between the characters being unlikable, except for Barry, and the story being so jumbled that I was like,
how can you make such a jumbled story out of something so simple?
Right.
Like one setting and one... Anyway, so that's that story. Let's go to stuff that's, excuse me, a little bit more good news is the gameplay.
Yes.
Now, the first and most important thing to mention is we played it co-op.
Right.
However, unlike Resident Evil 5 and 6, for whatever reason, they decided that Revelations 2 cannot be played online.
Right.
It has to be played
split screen.
So they literally cut the screen in half. Right. So
now, I don't know. When 5 was only on the PS3, I'm curious if it does.
I'd
have to look it up because it's possible that like. Did they not have the technology when Rev 5 came out?
I don't know about that. 6.
Anyway, whatever.
6 you definitely could. Anyway, so it's co-op. Now, a great distinction is made in that there's a main character, Barry and Claire, and they can do anything. They can use any item. They can have any gun. Moira, the side characters, Moira and Natalia, can't do much, although, to their credit, the stuff that they can do is pretty important.
It was enough, like, I played the secondary character in both things, and I enjoyed it a lot, even though I could literally not shoot anything. As Moira, I could do a little bit of physical combat, but like with Natalia, I could do no combat except throw a brick, and I still was like enjoying what was happening a lot.
Essentially, the secondary character will do stuff like Natalia's big thing is helping you find... I think both of them help find items. They'll like point out an item with the flashlight.
They both find items. Natalia can sense bad guys even through walls, which is really fun and helpful.
That's pretty key.
And makes for like almost like a stealth game where like I'll see a guy and I'll be like, oh, that guy's walking away. Go now. And so Spencer would like go whatever. Now that I'm thinking about it, some of the way that the co-op works, I really don't know that we could necessarily have played it as successfully not in the same room. Because some of that stuff, like
talk to each other,
but especially tough. Like with the little girl there's a thing with Natalia where there's these invisible enemies, and it was very hard.
And the only way you could tell where I was aiming is by looking at my screen,
right? And saying, vice versa. You could look at my screen and see the red and go, okay, where is that? So like, I really don't know. Maybe
I get that point because there are these invisible flying enemies, which are, by the way, one-hit kills. The only way you can tell they're around you is your vision blurs. Right. Now, Natalia can kind of see an outline of them.
Yeah, I see where they are.
When you're playing, excuse me, I would be looking, and now Natalia will give you verbal cues. You'll hold up your gun, she'll say, go to the right, you know. But the thing is,
but they're so few and far between.
You would go to the right, you would take a shot, and she would say, no, go down, and you would take a shot. She's not like you go to the right, and she just instantly says, no, go down.
Right.
So you're wasting a lot of bullets, and this is one of those games where you're never like very, confident on the amount of bullets you have.
Oh yeah.
But the main thing for that is, and we're not going to harp on it too long, is that the gameplay works really well.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not too complicated like 6. They don't constantly change stuff around like 6.
Oh, yeah, the UI thing.
They have a they have a pretty cool inventory system, almost
Yep.
like a mixture of 4 and 5.
Yep.
You're able to combine all these different, very simply combine these different
and
stuff.
the other cool thing was both of us were able to very easily, like 5 was cool, the item management, but they added that layer of you still had to be near each other to like trade items. This one, you could swap items back and forth without being near each other. You could open doors without being near each other, which was huge.
So
that was super fun.
We used that a lot. There would be a time where, like, say, he was out picking up items, and a bunch of enemies appeared, and I'm like, dang. And I was closer to the door. As long as you're within reasonable distance,
Right.
you can't be the whole way across, but within reasonable distance,
Yeah.
I can go to this door, open it, and he's going to warp to me.
Right.
And I actually like that in a co-op
Yeah.
game, because otherwise we would have died so many more
Oh,
times.
yeah,
it would have
yeah,
been
yeah.
ridiculous.
Yeah,
So,
like 5 and 6 where like there's like
you gotta
you both
be
have to
both
show
the
up
same
at the
door.
thing.
Right.
Was very frustrating because I understand, like, you know, we were abusing it a bit at certain parts, not very often, maybe like 3 times in the total game where we abused it, where it was like we would have died otherwise.
Right.
The rest of the time it was just like
A time save.
yeah, it was like, oh, I gotta run down this long hallway, and as Natalia, her run is just not very fast. It's not as fast as like the adults, and so like to just have to do it, like for the game to have to make you do it is like, okay, I get it. Like I don't care. Like, but the fact that it was like a nice way to streamline it, and I really enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah, so like I said, the item management, it's very streamlined and easy.
Yeah. And I could item manage while he was fighting, or he could item manage while I was searching, and it made things really
and
fun.
yeah, that even take the final boss for a great example. Like Natalia obviously can't do anything, but he was finding so many bullets for me. So while I was trying to lure the boss to me and shoot it and stuff, like I don't know if we could have beat that if like I was playing single player and only I was getting everything. It would be like, it was already such a long fight. It would be ridiculous. But you're like, oh, I found 10 Magnum rounds. Cool.
Yeah,
well, send them
that's
over to me.
huge.
You're in this corner. Send them over to me. You can.
Right,
And that's
exactly.
the thing. You know, you can use the second character, Natalia or whatever, as like your item save. So you're just like, I have a ton of bullets, but I don't want to get rid of them, obviously.
Right.
So there's no item chests or anything like that. So you give them to her. You just move it down. And you're like, I'm giving you this.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. So it was fun, and there was enough for both of us. I mean, obviously there was plenty for Spencer to do as the primary character, because you could play it single player. But there was plenty for the secondary character to do to make it worth it. Like, I'm reminded of like Super Mario Galaxy 2 or something, where like the second player can really do some cool stuff.
No.
But, like, they don't necessarily have to, like, play. But they get to do some cool stuff to interact with the environment.
Well, you even have some stuff like those boxes that can only be opened by the...
by the secondary character. Yeah,
so, like, there's
absolutely.
even times where, like, you might be like, you know, you fight these guys while I open this box kind of thing, because we don't have much time.
And as a single-player game, you literally have to switch between the characters to do those extra stuff. Because, like...
and again, the way we're reviewing this is
as co-op.
As co-op. I played it a couple years ago, single player, and I enjoyed it, but not as much as I did co-op. But that's kind of one of those things where that's how a game that has co-op should be. It should be more fun to play. It just
I mean, so you're playing with a friend, presumably, especially in this case where you can't play online. Which, like, as I'm thinking about it, I really don't know that it could work unless both of us saw both screens. Like, if it still showed split screen, but we were in other places, maybe that could work. But it was a lot easier for me to be like, look right there, and I could point and show you, and I could see where you were looking, and that kind of thing. So it definitely would have been harder. I don't know that it necessarily would have been impossible. I think you and I are good enough that we would have figured out a way to do it. But I think that the couch co-op definitely was easier than online co-op, so I can understand why they maybe made that decision, but it was definitely fun. Like we were starting to play, and the characters and story were so convoluted that I'm like, this is gonna be like an RE6. Like,
I told you that it was gonna be somewhat enjoyable,
right? And then the game started, and I was like, oh whoa, this is kind of cool. Like, it was immediately like I was drawn in gameplay wise. Like, as Moira, you have a flashlight, and you can sort of stun enemies with it. You can also find items, but like you can hit enemies with your crowbar, and there was some other cool stuff. So like it was enjoyable. And then Natalia was like a completely different level of gameplay, because it was like basically I was like a radar for Spencer, and I could kind of explain what to do, like, oh, there's 2 enemies up ahead, or there's an enemy on the ground, or this or that. And there was like, that was fun, a whole other way of being fun.
And it does that keeps it fresh. So
Absolutely.
The Claire parts feel like just your standard Resident Evil, where you're just trying to survive, trying to item manage, whatever. And then the Barry stuff, like, Barry is the strongest character, but he has literally no help from Natalia, so it feels like a much more like stealth-based thing. There's really cool parts where you can go around and like sneak around these enemies, and if you sneak up on them, you kill them very easily. Otherwise, they're pretty difficult to kill.
Exactly.
Another cool thing Natalia does is she will point at an enemy, a certain enemy called a Revenant, that will have one weak point.
But you can't see it.
Yes, Barry can't see it. She can see it.
Right.
So she'll point at it, and it'll like glow on the screen, so it's like right foot. I mean, Parker could say right foot, but it would still be like kind of hard, you know?
I mean, that's what made the invisible enemies, they didn't show a thing. I could point at it, but it never showed a thing. Yeah. So Spencer and I kind of had to work together to figure out, like, okay, stand behind me, or let's get to some place where there's like an easy like marker that I could be like, okay, it's to the right of that pole, and then it's like, okay, I see the pole, I'm gonna, so there was like something where we had to communicate, and that was fun. Like, that made it like interesting.
I'm just thinking about this right now. Despite the fact that this Resident Evil game has literally, correct me if I'm wrong, 0 puzzles. I mean, there's no puzzles. There wasn't the only puzzle, quote unquote, would be getting past enemies, but there's not like, oh, there was find keys, but that's not.
But there was like there was probably like 1 or 2 moments of puzzles in that like the only one that jumps to mind, and maybe it's the only one, is that one where we didn't know how to push the thing, and then you realized if you smashed the aquarium, it was pushable, which was like a fun little thing, but. If that was one, that was like the only one. Yeah. There wasn't much more than that. There wasn't like, oh cool, I gotta go bring this over there. The other one puzzle that jumps to mind is the box. The power brick, where you had to keep putting it on places and starting the conveyor belts.
Yeah, that I would count that as a puzzle.
Yeah. So there's probably like 2 puzzles.
It's still way less puzzle
there's
heavy.
Not a lot.
For a game that really...
It's not Resident Evil puzzles, like where there's tons.
It doesn't change itself too much through it. Yeah, the Barry stuff, you can go guns a-blazing, or you can go like Metal Gear style, but like in general, it's pretty much the same thing throughout. It's not like, oh, here's the puzzle part, oh, here's the whatever part.
Right. Yeah, even the puzzle part with Barry,
it still like feels like fun and fresh and whatever. I think it's just because like you get the right amount of like bullets, and you get the right amount of here's a big thing, there's upgrades. You find these parts boxes, and then you can go to these workbenches and upgrade your weapons, and that's
they
really
make
cool.
A difference. Like,
they make a difference,
a huge difference sometimes.
And just in general, it was it didn't reinvent the wheel by any means, but it was like solid.
Right.
Like I would mention to Parker once in a while that like you would have a standard zombie, I would shoot it in the head, and it would like die instantly, and then once in a while you would have something where it's like I would shoot in the head, and it would like
keep going.
It would be tough because like
it wasn't very obvious like damage. Like certain enemies and like certain exact enemies would take more ammo sometimes than others, and it was like, that's kind of dumb. Like that's frustrating.
It's got some really cool enemy designs though. You got this big bloated one that essentially throws pieces of itself that kind of like obscure your vision if it hits you.
Yep. Which was another cool thing. There were, instead of just an herb to heal you, there was also certain times you would get hurt to the point where you were bleeding, and when that happened, you would be like basically slowly dying if you left it, but you would have to apply a tourniquet, and then that would stop you from being like dying of blood. And then these enemies that hit you and obscured your vision, it would go away after like a long time, which at first we were like, that's obsessively long, but then we found out that there's an item that will immediately clear it, so that was cool too, because it was like, okay, like... So there were basically 3 status effects. I guess in Resident Evil 1 there was poison, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like that was a thing, whereas like in the later Resident Evil games there wasn't that. It was just straight up herbs. It was the only thing you ever needed. And in this one they added that in. So that added an extra layer of like items and strategy and stuff. So because you were like, okay, I'm hurt, but I'm not dead, so I'll use this and that or whatever. And so that was kind of cool too, like that level of item.
So to finish up on the gameplay part, I would say the major takeaway from this is co-op games are tough because sometimes there's co-op games that you're like, they kind of just threw this together and like everything feels forced. Like Resident Evil 6 does it a lot where you'll be like, oh, I constantly have to throw this person up to this higher part to do this thing.
Right. Or like that one part in 6 where I was like in that building and literally just watching you and Ada fight Simmons, and I'm like, I can't do anything. Like, I could shoot at him, but I don't know if it's doing anything. Like, so I feel like at a loss.
It's really tough to make a co-op game that doesn't feel like it's like forcing you to co-op, if that makes sense. Like, constantly do stuff. Because on this one, you could many times go out on your, and this is very unique, go out on your own and do your own thing. Like, you would just enter a room and just go around and pick up a bunch of items and stuff like that. And I would just
that was my purpose.
I would clear out the enemies, but at the same time, it worked together because we could share them in that way.
Right.
So it does a really good job of that. I don't have too many complaints to say about the gameplay.
I will say, though, that I can't imagine playing that game single player. Yeah. Like, to the point where, like, I feel like, I don't know how you say that you played it a while ago and enjoyed it.
I got it done.
I would never have finished that game. If I started it, I would have been like, nope, not for me. Or I would have been like, I have to find somebody to play with. Because it was a game changer, like, for me, to play with another person. It was, like, fun.
You can easily, there's, like, a button that changes you between the two characters, and it's quick. It doesn't have to load or anything.
That might be okay.
It is what it is, so, like, it just takes longer. You'll clear out a room from enemies, and then you'll switch to Natalia, and you'll be like, oh, there it is, whatever. Yeah. And that would be, obviously, would dock it. But overall, like I said, don't have too much to complain about here. Yep. Looking at a 7.5 for the gameplay.
Yeah, I would give this definitely a solid 7 for gameplay. Like, again, like, we keep harping on this, but 5 is, like, average. So 7 is good.
Yep.
7 is good.
7 is good. 7 is good. So let's bump over real quick to that was the meat of this. These last 4 are usually much quicker. We have sound.
Yeah.
Voice acting, sound effects. Nothing to write home about. I don't know if they changed Barry's voice actor from what it was in, like, the Resident Evil 1 remake and stuff.
I liked his voice actor.
I liked his voice actor. That was my point. But
I liked his character.
But
and
you could literally Moira was annoying, so I'll remember her.
Right.
But you could literally play me a clip right now of Claire and Natalia talking, and I wouldn't know. I wouldn't, like, recognize it.
No. I mean, like, at least Claire was, like, forgettable. Natalia was forgettable, but also, like, a couple moments of awkwardness, because I guess they did get a little girl actor. I don't know if if it was an adult faking a little girl, then that person is a terrible voice actor. But, like, if it was a little girl, it's at least understandable that it's like, well, kids aren't great at acting sometimes.
Yeah.
So maybe she's just bad at it. But, like, you'd think they would have recast, because she was just, like, it ruined certain scenes, because she's like, you're like, ugh.
And like
gross.
we said, Alex Wesker was, like, the generic evil woman.
Gosh,
I couldn't tell
annoying.
if Ada or her was talking, and honestly, you could convince me pretty easily that it was Ada's voice actor slightly changing it. So that was bad overall. The music was nothing to write home about. There was some good, like, atmospheric, and this kind of falls in the next part, but there was some good, like just, like, quiet moments, but like, really, I'm going to just straight up go ahead and say that I can't think of anything more average than this, so I'm going to give it a 5.
Yeah, I mean, I would give it a 4 because I didn't like the voice acting. If I would give it a 5, if it was forgettable.
I would consider 4, but I liked Barry, so I'm going to give.
That's true.
I'm bump it up a little bit.
I feel like I would give it a 3, but I like Barry, so it's 4. Because it was just like I didn't care. Like the Moira was just so annoying as an annoying teenager. I hated Alex, her whole thing going on. So yeah, 4 for me on that.
Next we have graphics and atmosphere. We put these in one category. The atmosphere, if we're looking at it, is actually pretty good.
Yeah.
They do a really good job of setting up these different, like, settings, and, like, you feel like you're on this desolate island.
I mean, it is like, at least Barry's section, everything blew up. So it's like, it's all broken. And so it's a little, like, if it was all, like, Barry's style, where everything was broken down the whole game, I probably would have not liked it as much. But the fact that you got to see it in full working condition, and then you go back as Barry and you see it in broken down condition,
and
I like that a lot.
That's and this goes back to gameplay, but that they do a good job of having you essentially replay a lot, not everything, but a lot of parts twice, but not feeling
and
like
very different in a way.
Yeah.
You saw areas where, okay, I recognize this, but for the most part, you were doing different stuff, so you weren't like, what? Like, you weren't like confused. Right?
So yeah, the atmosphere in general is really good. They set it up really good. I'm conflicted about graphics because like it's not good. It's not like an Uncharted.
I mean, it's
where
not.
like,
It's not.
whoa.
It's not a PS4 game, but I guess it was released on PS3.
Well,
no, it was. This was released on both.
Yeah,
so it was designed for the PS4.
I'm thinking that it was designed for the PS4. It's not great.
No.
It's not bad. It has a unique style, but it's not like a Doom where it's like a unique cel-shaded style. It's just like a unique style in which that like it's not overpowering the game.
Right.
Again,
it probably looks more, even though this game came out after 6.
Yes.
Okay.
After a couple years after.
I feel
6.
like it looks more like 5 than 6. Like look or feel like, just in terms of like some of the designs, I guess.
Yeah.
And
that's part of it. The
designs was good.
To give it good stuff, the designs were good. I thought Claire was so ugly compared to like what she was in the past, and I know that's like kind of a harp, but like legitimately, like they just made her look weird. Like
and you probably come into that a little bit because you have something you're bringing in. Like I don't have too much Resident Evil stuff. I've mostly played from 5 on. I've played a bit of the originals, but not enough to like care. Like I don't like have a feeling about Chris or Jill or Claire or whoever, from these original games that were awesome. Like, so you have that going in where you're like, oh, I like Claire as a character, and then you're like, they ruined her, a little bit. Like you're like, they kind of messed her up.
Right.
So
I don't know but like in general, everything looks pretty good. Like I don't want to call it a budget title. Like it's this weird line between like Resident Evil 6 is bad, but clearly they put a bunch of money into it.
Right.
This one would have like, because 6 flopped so hard, clearly much less of a budget.
Yes.
So it seems like they did more with less, but again, it's not great. Now, if I'm looking, graphics and atmosphere includes how the monsters look, which is really good.
Right.
How the characters look, which is okay.
Right.
How the settings look, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
I think overall I'm looking at something pretty quality. Oh, another thing that really helps is it runs at a good frame rate for a game like this, which is really helpful. I would rather have a game that's like not super as pretty, but it runs at a good frame rate.
Absolutely.
Like sometimes I very much struggle with the Uncharted games because they're like so pretty, but then it's like frame rate's pretty
it
bad.
hurts when there's a lot happening.
Yeah.
It's like starts
so like this one is just like, you can have a bunch of enemies and you're not like, it's struggling. So I think I'm going to give this a little bit higher than an average and say a 6 overall on this.
Yeah, I would give this stuff like a 6.5 because I'll give it a 7 because like I said, I didn't really have anything going into of what Claire or Barry would look like, and I thought everything looked good. I did like the design, the enemy designs. Resident Evil always does a good job of that, and this is no different. Like the enemies, like as annoying of a final boss as it was, and this and that, like. It was pretty cool. And like watching her evolution from like that weird hunched figure to like that long elongated like monster. It was neat. I enjoyed it.
I'm actually going to bump mine to a 6.5 because I really did like the enemy design. They did a really good job with that. So bumping that up. So second to last one, we have fun factor. I had fun. I mean, I had fun. It was endearing. It was fun.
Again, as co-op.
I
would not have had fun
as co-op.
with this.
I'm not going to include this into my rating, but it should be mentioned that there are do you want to talk about replayability? There are so many things you can unlock. It is absurd. Yeah. So it's not going to hurt my fun factor, but like clearly to get everything you want to do and get like all the cool stuff, it does not. Many playthroughs are going to be involved.
I think it hurts fun factor for sure. I think it goes into both replayability and fun factor.
Yeah,
like they clearly tried to make this a game that you would play forever,
like a million times, right?
And like it's not a game you would ever play more than once. I don't know. I mean, maybe like they were trying, I guess, but I guess the point is when you go to make a game. you're probably optimistic. So you're like,
you want to get
making
more
a game,
things.
we're making a game that people want to play. So obviously I'm going to, because the worst thing would be if you had a game that people wanted to play and then there was nothing to do. Because then they'd be like, well, I'm never picking that up again, but I'd love to.
Right.
But part of it's like, you got to have a little bit of awareness. Like, there was so much to unlock. Like, the major, like, the super primary, final level skill that you could unlock, which would be not only you have to unlock all the tiers to get to it,
right?
But the skill itself cost 100,000.
And not only that, there were, when we were looking at that unlockable thing, that unlockable list, there were 130. We had 15 unlocked. And
they cost 1,000
you have to buy them. Well, some of them were 10,000
yeah.
apiece. And like us playing through that game, we would play entire chapters and get like 10,000.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like we were like there were stuff we were missing out on. They had these little like metal thing going on where and that was cool as well. To add to the fun factor, it would be like you would look at it and be like, kill 5 revenants without being seen, and you would get like a little bit extra BP. But I still feel like if you did everything, you would still be having to play through this game like so many times to get all this stuff.
Absolutely.
Even like minor stuff like costumes. That like, dude, you unlock the costume, you get the costume, please. You know what I mean? Like maybe
they did give you some of the costumes, but then there were other ones that you had to buy, and it was I even guess like
dumb. Maybe some like weapons or like the skills or whatever, but like clearly they had this set up to play like a million times. I mean, we just scraped the bottom of the barrel. One other thing to mention, and I'm not going to put this in the fun factor because I don't care about trophies, but someone who cares about trophies, do not bother. This game, it has at least 4 or 5 trophies that are marked on PSN as a 0.4%.
Like, that's how many people have gotten it.
Which is just crazy because there are many people out there that like super try for these trophies. There's one that we were just laughing at. It's invisible mode. All enemies during these chapters would be invisible. So like there are hundreds of enemies of varying types,
especially parts where there was waves.
How would you do any Revenant part where you have to? I guess if you had Natalia, the Natalia part would be okay because you would have to like absolutely rely on Natalia constantly for that.
But I think in general, where the enemies appear at least is the same.
Yeah, but that's so much memorization for a dang trophy.
Right.
Like,
for a game that's not good. Like, it's one thing to have a game that, like, is so good that you were like, you know what? I would play it that much. But, like, to be that unaware of yourself. Like, you know, I didn't like it enough to ever replay it. But to be like, oh, well, we'll put some stuff in there. So to put enough to, like, maybe have to replay it, like, 5 times through. Obviously, each time you're going to get faster at it. So, like, it's going to be okay. You're going to have a better weapons, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So, like, it will be easier and easier. So I can understand that. But, like, this looks like this would be the only game you play. It's like Skyrim. Like, you would be sinking, like, hundreds or thousands, you know, hundreds and hundreds of hours into this in order to unlock everything. Like, that seems for like this game. Do you know what I mean?
Upset. Yeah,
like
very
I understand it with like Fallout or you know, like these games that have a lot to do. It makes sense. I still don't understand ever sinking thousands of hours into any game, but like hundreds, whatever. Like, it's just crazy to me that like what they put in there. Like, I mean, maybe there was a way that like your BP gets multiplied that we didn't get to, but like we were only ever getting like 10 to 15,000 BP,
and
maybe 30,000.
We weren't getting like S ranks, but we were getting like A and B ranks and stuff like that.
And because I was co-op, I was finding items everywhere. So there's like basically like RE5 and RE6. There's you can find things throughout the level that give you
when
more
you realize
BP.
the grand scheme of things, which how much it is like. You know, in RE6, we would, like, it would be the point where you, like, wouldn't even bother picking up skill points, because there was, like, no point.
Right.
So, like, if you find, like, one of those gems and it's, like, 100 BP, that literally means nothing.
Right.
It's like...
You had to pick up 1,000 of them.
You know, it's like being a millionaire and seeing, like, a penny, and you're like, meh, you know what I mean? Like,
I'm
it's just, like, it's not
I'm not
even
gonna
worth
bend
it.
down and pick
it's
up
not
that
worth
penny.
bending down for it, kind of thing. So, I don't know. It's... I had a good time. There's a lot of stuff that kind of, like, irks me about it, but overall, I did have a really good time co-op.
Right.
I'm going to be giving this one a 7 on the fun factor.
Fun of playing with co-op, because I'm putting all that extra stuff into replayability. So, because I'd like to give it a better score than I would normally for fun factor. So, because I did have fun. So, I'm going to say 7.5 on fun, because I did enjoy myself.
So let's talk really quickly as the last part, the replayability.
Right. I mean, we did talk about it.
So we're pretty much done this. I'm gonna say I would have given it a 5, but I found myself playing it again, so I did it. Like I can't say like
I will say though, if you would have played it the first time co-op,
then I wouldn't have
never have gone back. The fact of the matter is, it's so different co-op that if you're gonna pick this game up, only play it co-op. Because it's fun. And if you don't play it co-op, I don't see how it could be fun. Whatever. Maybe you find fun in it. I don't see how it could be fun. So, replayability, though, like, I'm never going to pick this game up. Yep. Ever in my whole life.
So what are you giving it on that one?
I'm going to give it, like, a 3. Like,
because
unfortunately.
There would be a chance?
No. Oh, I see. Here's the thing. I guess I'm going to give it a 1. Because there might be a friend that never played it, and I'm like, oh, yeah, it's fun to go through. Now, that being said, I would have given it a 3, but I just remembered all that stuff to unlock, and that makes me so angry that I'm docking it an additional 2 points. Because the idea that the audacity that they thought they made a game that you could sink hundreds of hours into.
And that was like after we beat the game that we were like, let's look at this stuff. And it was just like scrolling through the list just kept going. And it's like
it's just unreal.
I mean, I've played like huge Final Fantasy games that are like have less unlockables.
Oh yeah.
Than that.
Like Diablo 3 was super fun to keep replaying. And while I didn't want to keep going, I could see how somebody could make that like one of the only games they play. And they just, like, sink all their time into it. Like, I can see it. I can't grasp it, but I can see it. Resident Evil 5, I personally replayed it a bunch of times while we were going through a co-op, because I would replay missions to beef up my weapons. I really enjoyed leveling my stuff up, unlocking. There was a ton to unlock in 5, and there was a ton to pay for, but I enjoyed doing it. It was fun to do, and it was a reasonable amount. The game was good enough that I wanted to unlock it, and the amount they had to unlock was reasonable. It looked like I probably would never have unlocked it all, but it looked like there was a reasonable amount of time I could sink into it to get 100%. Like, this is completely unreasonable, so I bumped it down to a 1.
Just absurd.
It just made me angry.
And I gave it a 6 because I would have given it a 5 because it's one of those games where I would be very apathetic about doing it again, but I found myself doing it again. And part of replayability is, if we're just taking it at its pure technical term, is replaying it. And although I replayed it again as co-op and I played it the single player time, I did replay it, and you do have that option of, if you are suckered into playing it single player, of playing it co-op. So I do have to bump that up a little bit, although I do absolutely agree with all those sentiments. So overall, when we're looking at the scores, I came up to a 36, which divided by 6 is 6. We did math.
Above average.
So above, and I think that ends up being perfectly fine. And then Parker's comes to 29.5. Now, this was hurt a lot by the replayability, but it is what it is. And it came up to a 4.9.
Yeah. Now, for me, the reason it went below average was because I played it co-op first. That made it so that I am done. If you are watching this, or listening to this, I'm saying, and you happened to play it single player, and you kind of agree with us on a lot of the points of replayability, I would urge you to find a friend to replay it with, because it is worth it and it is fun. Now, if you already played it co-op,
then you're done. You're done. It's fine. This is one of those really weird enigmas of a game where it does everything wrong.
Right.
But it's fun.
It does a couple things right.
Yeah, all right. So
But
it does
a couple things right in a way that's so right that it's fun.
Yes. Okay, that's a better way of putting it. So like the story is terrible. The characters are terrible.
Which right there, if somebody told me, "Oh, do you and your friend want to play through a game where the story and the characters are terrible?" Like I'm like, not really. Like,
it would have to be like Doom tier. It would have to be like, if you were like, Doom 2016 has the worst story, I'd be like, I don't care.
Yeah,
but on a game that like kind of relies on story, like, and stuff like that, it's like, so
a game
so
called
that's
Revelations.
The sound's terrible, you know. The replayability is terrible, but it has solid enough gameplay and unique enough gameplay.
Yeah,
I've never seen another co-op game where like both, yes, characters will have different abilities. You can play a Baldur's Gate and have one person be a healer, one person be whatever, but never quite like this, where it's like it's like so unique how it's set up. So like it ticks every wrong box. It's not good, but it's fun, and that's so weird. It's like that, like it's like that bad album, you know. That's like it's that Celestial Highway whatever by Smash Mouth, where you're like, I could listen to this. Is it good? No. But it's like, how many times have you listened to like All Star in your life? A million. Dude.
Yeah,
you
and
know?
it's like, how many times have you listened to like a legitimately critically acclaimed song? Like, I mean, a lot, but probably not as much as Smash Mouth, unfortunately. Like, I feel uncomfortable saying that, but it's true.
So it's so weird, because normally when we do this, we're either like, it's bad or it's good, and this one it's like it's bad but it's fun. Yeah. So
I mean, like I will say that this is a case where when it's all added up, I feel a little bit bad about my score, because I would slightly recommend this, but I guess my point is, it would have to be a specific situation,
and
that's where it does.
That in itself lends to that average ranking, because it's like, will you have fun? Yeah, but is like the second you have to put that but, and that asterisk is you got to play co-op, and you got to understand what you're getting into. Right. So that already is like, you know,
if you have a friend that you enjoy like making fun of like bad movies with, and you have a friend that like is like the same level of gameplay as you and is not like, if you played this with somebody that loved it, I would have not enjoyed it. Like, if somebody was like, oh my god, this story's so great, I would have not enjoyed it at all. But like the fact that we can kind of joke around about it, and that we're both like the same skill level, because that is another thing, is the game was tough. There was a lot of times where we both, either one of us died, and if one of us was much better than the other, it would make for a very, like, it would become like, you know, new Super Mario Brothers, where you just start getting angry at each other, you know, like, for like, stop it, you know what I mean? Like, there were some moments where one or the other of us would kind of be like, dude, why'd you do that? But like, it was like that kind of like competition, that sort of thing, where you were like, do better, and it was like, yeah, I want to, and we did it, and we finished it. But it was never like, dude, I am so done playing with you. Like, there was never a time where we were like mad at each other. But again,
so it's very, it's very specific,
right?
You know?
So there's a laundry list of things that I have to say before I recommend this game, which is why it bumps it down to a 4.9.
Well, and you know, it's that album where your friend's like, would you recommend it? It's like, okay, do you like the genre? Yeah. Okay, you got to be in a certain mood, because and you got to realize that like this band has better albums by it. So if you're
so much to explain.
So it's like yeah, well, I like this band, but like, you know, I'd rather listen to this album by it. But it's like, okay, so then listen to that album by it, because it exists.
I don't know if you saw the last season of Always Sunny, not the most recent season, but there's that one where they go to the art museum, and Mac gets all mad that the art looks like dumb, like it could be done by a kid. But then like the woman selling the art's like, but it has a story. Like, the guy who painted this like was like, you know, confined to, you know, this like prison for a long time, and then wrote and he's like, but that looks terrible, and it's like, but it's the story, and it's like, you have to have all this extra stuff to explain why it's good, and it's like, no!
Dude, it's, I mean, in terms of the Resident Evil series, it's like, I'm gonna put it to music. It's like, okay, the Beatles are one of my favorite bands. but I hate Magical Mystery Tour.
Right.
It has a couple okay songs, but overall, I think it's they got too weird.
Right.
For like that
for
one
you,
album.
for you
because
as well.
Because
right.
before it was Revolver, which is perfection.
Right.
Or, excuse me, I'm sorry. It was Sgt. Pepper's, which is also perfection.
Right.
And then after it's White Album, where it's also weird and has some fluff, but in general, it's like very, very good.
Yeah.
So you would have to be like, do you want to listen to Magical Mystery Tour? I'd have to be like, I'm in a Beatles mood.
Right.
I like the Beatles, but I don't want to listen to any of the other 10 amazing albums. Well, then I got the thing for you. It's like, this is like Revelations 2. It's like, you'd be like, you want to play
I love
co-op?
Resident Evil. I like fun gameplay with a co-op friend. But
but I played Resident Evil 5 so much, so you'd be like, you want to play a co-op Resident Evil? Be like, yeah, is 5 available? Yeah, well, it's just like, or whatever. It's like, you want to play a co-op game? Well, there's really nothing else available, that exists, in this.
Yep.
But do you feel like playing this genre? I have to play this genre, but I have to play it co-op.
Right.
Great, because there's one thing that falls under this category. So it's just it's just one of those very specific things. I'm glad we went through it. I'm sad that we don't have any more co-op Resident Evil games. I mean, I'm still gonna force us to go through a couple of the not good. Necessarily classics, but like maybe 4.
Well, I feel like we should. I feel like I because it was a PlayStation Plus thing, and I do have it. They did a remaster of 1.
See here,
that got released. On
I'll
PS4.
do it, man. But that game is so scary.
I agree.
It is so ridiculous.
And it's going to be even scarier because it looks good.
It looks so good.
And so, like, it's like, ooh, this is
one day we got to do 4 because you've never beaten 4. You might have messed around with it a little.
No, I've literally never played a second.
So, like, that's going to be really interesting because that's going to be one of those cases. It's going to be like...
Because is that like a high watermark for the action ones, right? Like,
dude, I think it's a high watermark for, like, gaming. Like,
Gotcha.
It's just... So, this is like... Okay, so I'm that guy that has never seen blank movie, right? So, like, you know how, like, everything that you've ever done or watched will always have this little bit of, recency bias where you're like, wow, I watched it a million times when I was younger, so it's just amazing. And it's like, okay, maybe Indiana Jones, the first one, isn't, like, perfection of a movie, but everyone... Okay, so it is.
No, it's good. It's not perfection,
but
it's
people
good.
talk like it, like it's like the best thing of all time kind of thing.
They treat it a lot better than they maybe should. Because
and when I watched it, I was like, I had a really good time, but I wasn't like, well, that was an all-time classic kind of thing.
That's Godfather. Like,
so,
no, it's not Godfather.
So it's one of those, and that happens to me a lot. It'll be like, oh, Back to the Future. Like, Back to the Future has its own, like, subculture of, like, things. And
another one that I hear people complain about is Goonies.
I've never seen Goonies, and
if you see it as a kid, it's amazing, and if you see it again as an adult, also amazing. If you never saw it and you saw it as an adult, you would just be annoyed at these kids. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? You just be like, what's happening?
I have no plans of ever watching that one. Like, there's no reason to.
Yeah, but it's definitely like a cult classic that everybody loves from a certain generation, but specifically they had to see it like when they were a kid.
Yeah, because and that's like I said, this is me for like every movie where it's like, you haven't seen Back to the Future, whatever, it has its own scope.
Yeah, and then you watch it and you go,
and you're like, it was good. Like I had a good time, but it wasn't like I can't see how this became
what it is.
I mean, like literally to the point where like Family Guy has like spoofed every single second of it from the beginning to the end, kind of thing. Right. So that'll be interesting to see for Resident Evil 4, where it's like I just think it's like just the best.
Right. And I've played like specifically I think from what I gather from gameplay videos that I have seen bits of, it's very like 5 was like, let's just keep doing what we did because 4 was a huge success.
Right.
So like, but then let's add in co-op.
Right.
So it's like, let's just do 4 with some co-op. And like, so my first one was 5 to play through. Like, I played through 1 way back in the day on PS1 all the way through and enjoyed it at the time for sure. But like, that's it. Like 2 I played with a bit, 3 I played with a bit, but that's it. I never sunk time into them or had any care. Code Veronica, I probably think got 3/4 of the way through and then just put it down because like I just was like, oh, this is too hard, or like I think I got to a save point where I had like no ammo and I was like, well, I quit.
Yep.
so like it's definitely like going to be interesting to see like how I feel about 4 because I hear so much about it. You know, people have like, oh my god, 4. Oh,
I mean, it's one of those games. It's one of those. It's the Goonies or whatever. Well,
right.
No, I
No,
don't think
because it's good. Because it is good.
It's a Back to the Future or whatever, where
Right.
it's just like
Where it is good.
it is, yes.
But like, will
Will
I
it?
think it's good? I'm
Right.
curious, and I'm sure if I play it, I'm gonna do the new re-release, right? The
the PS4 one. Yeah. So it's gonna have slightly better graphics and
right.
whatever.
Yeah.
But
So yeah, I'd be interested. Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, I'm kind of excited for that one. But I'm excited to go back through and play some of the other ones as well, like whichever ones you have in mind. Because I do much like when we talked about Doom. I like the world that they've created in some way.
they just want a little.
Because it's cool. It's
I mean-
better than a regular zombie movie. Like, it's not like, oh, there's a zombie outbreak. Like, there's more to it, and I like that. But then
I mean, by the time we're even at 5 or 6, there's like 10, 12 different games, not in the main series, but in the series in general, and it's like, dude, it's just one of those things.
Right.
Like, it's like
you can't connect them all.
if-
Like, you just can't. You might try, but you just can't. Like, there's
especially
so
when they're
all
different
over.
characters. You
Right.
know, you either have to decide to make it like Harry Potter and make it like 8 things, but all the same, you know, whatever, all
Right.
the same like
Right.
people and whatever.
Or like a very strict chronological story that's happening.
Yeah.
Like, whereas this is these
Well,
things
even
all
by the,
happen.
Even by the time 3 happened, it was technically off because 3, and this is pretty interesting. 3 starts before 2, one day before 2, and it ends one day after 2. So something happens where time passes in the middle of 3.
Gotcha.
So then you're like, when the end of 3 happens, and I'm not going to give it away because
Right.
whatever. You know, you're like, how could 2 happen? And then you're like, oh, that's why.
Gotcha,
you know, kind of thing. So
gotcha.
they even back then they like kind of went off of it, but it was like, again, you can
Right.
clearly tell the series. Like I think I don't know. The second you make a video game series into a movie, it like just like kind of like it just makes
especially
it
like how
That
many.
kind of
I mean,
yeah.
how many too? Is there like 5?
tough. Dude, there's probably
7?
more than that. There's probably more than that. And I was talking to someone, they called this newest one that just came out, like, the final chapter or something like that.
Have you seen any of them?
The first one, just a little, and I hated it. It was just, I don't know.
I'd be interested to watch them. Just, I mean, I feel like I probably couldn't get you to sit through them, but I feel like I might sit through them because I watch more movies than you do. You know, so like I might go through them just to be like, wow, that's bad.
I don't even know if it's bad. It's just like over the top, and it's just like it seems like one of those things where it's like, thank you for making a movie and just tossing Resident Evil on it. Yeah, I was talking to someone. They were like, yeah, I really enjoyed the last Resident Evil movie. It's called The Final Chapter, but like at the end, they like leave it super open for a cliffhanger, and it's like automatic 0 out of 10. Like if we're like gonna give Revelations problems for not like revealing anything, it's like you can't be like
the final
oh, it's a big open like Saw the final chapter, which of all movies for me to see all of them this series, I've seen every one.
That's
like
amazing.
at least it like ends it and you're like,
good.
it's over. I mean, they could eventually reboot it and be like, look at what we did.
Right.
But it's like, it's not like, duh, Saul's hand comes out from the face. You know. So anyway, that's it for today, guys. Next time we'll be bringing you something not Resident Evil for these.
Interesting.
I don't know what it is yet, but it will be Resident Evil. Thank you guys again for listening.